my biological dad, Jerry. And I immediately felt something drop in the pit of my stomach. My dad does not call that early. I felt something was wrong immediately. Okay. So I answered the phone, and the first words out of his mouth were not even hello, anything like that. He said, "Have you talked to your brother?" I knew something had happened. And I said, "No, why? What is going on?" And he said, "Well, a neighbor called my aunt, my dad's sister, and told her that she was listening to the police scanner, and it said that Matthew had shot and killed his dad." So my aunt immediately thought it was my father, our biological father.
Okay, Jerry.
Yeah. So luckily I had someone there to watch the kids. I jumped in my car and probably, I don't know, drove 80, 90 miles an hour, which I was only probably 5 miles away, or maybe a little more. And when I got to the bottom of the hill our house is far up on the hill, there was sheriff's cars everywhere. And they had the whole hill blocked. They wouldn't even let me turn up the hill.
The street. Oh my God.
So I was immediately really concerned, obviously, because I needed to find out if it was true, what happened, who is okay, who's not okay. Also, my grandparents lived at the bottom of our hill. My grandfather was in the very close to the end stages of Alzheimer's, so I knew he would be really confused, and my grandmother would be devastated. They wouldn't even let me go up to my grandparents' house to check on them. And something that actually stuck with me is the way that the deputies spoke to me when they asked who I was. And a female deputy asked my name, and I told her, and one of the male deputies there said, "Oh, she's one of the stepkids. That's not his real kids. Make her stay down here. She's one of them." And we always kind of felt like we were one of the bad kids, you know.
Right.
But a few minutes after I got there, my stepbrother pulled up, and he was speaking to one of the deputies trying to find out what's going on also, and he started crying, obviously. And I thought I wanted to go hug him so bad, but I felt so guilty for what my brother did.
I know, right. And as a young person, I think too that has to be so conflicting, right? That's your brother.
It is.
So do you want to tell them what happened? Like why that was conflicting for you? What happened?
So let's see. It allowed me to walk up the hill to my mother, and my understanding was that my brother had shot my stepfather. I didn't know the details. I didn't know the story behind it. All I know is once I started walking up the hill, it's a pretty steep one, and once I saw the roadway that was closer to our family home, I noticed that my mother was standing in her nightgown, and it was covered in blood, and she had one slipper on. And I immediately felt sick to my stomach that this was real. And she just looked like a deer in the headlights. I walked up and I said, "What happened?" And she just said, "Matthew shot Rich." And I fell apart. And it was complete chaos that morning. People were showing up, trying to separate us from each other. They didn't want anyone talking. They wouldn't let my mom leave to go to the hospital. At that point, my stepfather had already been airlifted to a San Jose trauma center. And they were not allowing her to leave even until they spoke with her. And It was just, and shockingly enough, even the media showed up within an hour.
Wow.
And they were trying to film us crying, and in that moment they were trying to get closer and closer and film us.
Gotta love the media.
So,
oh wow. I did read something when you sent me some of the articles. I remember reading something saying about how people are trying to contact you at work. I mean, it's just that they'll go to no end. So,
yeah.
wow. Okay, so they didn't let your mom go.
No, they didn't let her go right away. So I didn't know where he was shot, what happened.
Okay.
Is he alive? You know, I knew none of that. And then, so I finally asked her, like, did you see him? Do you know if he's alive? And she said, yes, he was talking. And I thought, okay, thank God. Okay, he was talking.
Yeah.
So I had some hope that he was at least going to possibly be okay.
Right.
You know? And even though we were standing down in the roadway, I thought I'd better call our real dad and tell him what happened, because he was still in the dark about what the details were.
Right.
And when I told him that Matthew had shot my stepfather, that was the first time in my life I'd ever heard my dad kind of, like, tearful. I'd never seen him cry. Never. My dad was a tough guy. Like, I'd seen him accidentally cut his own finger off when he was chopping wood, and this man didn't break a sweat. Like,
wow. Oh.
So that was really
hard.
That was really hard. Yeah, it was very hard.
Did you feel like were you talking to him face to face, or were you talking to him on the phone? Like, did you feel like you could give him some support, or is that just?
I'm sorry, did
you feel like you could, I don't know if when you talked to Jerry on the phone, and did you feel like were you on the phone, or were you guys face to face?
I was on the phone when I called to tell him, like, it's true. You know,
because you feel like you're just helpless and you can't do anything.
Right.
I mean, you feel so
right.
helpless.
So some of that day is right.
Okay. Sweetie, go ahead.
Some of that day is a blur. You know, there's bits and pieces that, like, are kind of burned in my brain, and then there's some that just, it was such a blur because there was so much chaos going around, you know.
Right.
And I just kept, we have to hurry up and get to the hospital. We have to go find out if he's okay and what's happening.
Did they put your brother in custody right away, or did they have to find him, or how did that go?
Actually, yeah, that was another thing I found out later on after obtaining an attorney for him. He had went up into, behind our family home, there's like a bunch of wooded area. Okay. And I guess he had broke a window and went up into the 500 acres back there. And they hadn't, that we knew of, they hadn't yet found him. Now I heard one of the cops' radios saying that they had located him. And in my mind, I just thought, I know my brother, and he's going to go out. And
he's not going to go easy. Yeah.
He is not giving up.
Yeah.
But I guess what ended up happening is he went back through the trails and made his way down. We knew the trails like the back of our hand because we grew up here. You know, ride horses back there and bikes. So he went down and came behind our local American Legion to get, I guess, a drink of water from the water hose there. And there was a man doing yard work that saw him and called one of the police officers back and said, hey, are you looking for a guy? There's some guy up here with no shirt on running around. So from what I was told, they had a crime scene van, like a mobile van, already ready to take him in immediately. So they took him in, they collected any articles of clothing he had, and started, I guess, doing whatever process they do to, you know, with a crime scene.
Wow.
So I was actually shocked and relieved to find out that he had went ahead and been taken in without a fight.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so your stepdad's been air flighted to, which I'm sure you said San Jose, right? So I'm sure it was Valley Med.
Yeah,
We have one of the
I'm
biggest trauma
sure.
centers
Yes.
in Santa Clara County, and in that
Right.
so were you guys able to go see him? I mean, were you guys able to get to him? Obviously, eventually.
Eventually, yes. Yes, I feel like it was maybe a couple hours. It felt like forever.
Did you guys drive?
They let.
Were you guys like driving? Did you guys have to drive from there to there? Because
Yeah.
it's kind of it takes like, I think, what, an hour and a half. So I'm sure it seemed like an eternity.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, about that. I drove. There was a lady. I think she was either somebody with the sheriff's department or with the DA's office, and they are who ended up driving my mother up there.
Okay.
She was in no shape to drive, obviously.
Yeah.
And I was just in panic mode. I have to get there, so I drove myself up and got there.
Okay.
And it was another one of those situations. As soon as I got to the right floor and was kind of directed down that hallway, I look and there's like all these cops and my step grandmother and the ex-wife of my stepfather and his kids, and everyone's looking at me like,
wow,
oh, there's her.
Oh, there she is. Like that.
I stood by myself. Yeah, I was by myself, kind of tucked away in a corner of the hallway, and nobody would speak to me.
So obviously you were there you were there to be supportive.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, I think this is an important thing, right? Is that is that how, birds of a feather, right? Just you're made from the same cloth, they're, that's them, this is us. I mean, that's really devastating. I mean, like, it's your brother that committed it. It's not you. It wasn't you.
Right.
And you're being there to be supportive.
Yeah. And I was, at that point, I was absolutely there to see my stepfather.
Right.
And to see what condition he's in. And I had to have that peace of mind and know that he was okay. Right. And also be there for my mother.
Right.
I knew I had to deal with my brother after that also.
Right.
Because, again, I'm trying to hold everyone together in some...
You love your brother. You don't like what he did, but you love him, right? And so that's another thing Jen and I have talked about offline is that that's definitely what they call it, like a juxtaposition. On one side, you want to be supportive for your mom, and obviously it's devastating. Your brother just committed a basically attempted murder, and but you love him. That's your brother. That's your blood. That person protected you. That person did this. So for a woman, and again for a man, but I can only speak for ourselves, is that it is a really hard, strange position to be in, to have to stand on both sides, straddle both sides of the fence.
Exactly. And trying to make sure you don't upset either party. And it was like walking a tightrope.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I can only imagine. So
there's no right.
There isn't
a wrong way.
No one is going to write a book, right, about how do you do this when one of your family members does something like this, or your husband or your wife or whatever. So, I always found that really interesting how they just lump. You're just put in this category.
Absolutely.
Like you're just as guilty.
Yeah.
Even with me just being married to Mitch, like people say, the first thing people always used to ask me was, well, why is he in prison? Right. And then I would say it, and then people were like, oh, and I again, the people who really loved me and really stood by me, like, no, like whatever. But the others, they put me in the flock. Right. So it's just like, oh, well, why would you want to be with somebody like that? So I can only imagine that's my husband, but I can only imagine if you being directly, this is my brother.
Right. And even
family cohesion.
Right. Even in that waiting area, at some point, my step grandmother walked up to me, and I thought maybe she was going to try and comfort me or hug me.
Yeah.
Instead, she asked me, "Why did your brother do this?" Like I would have an answer.
Right. Oh, well, this is why.
I
That's
was
crazy.
I was shocked and really immediately hurt, you know,
Right.
because it just confirmed even more, like, you are not part of us. You are them.
Right.
You're
You're
on
like
that side
alien esque
over
to
there.
them for sure. Oh.
Right.
So did you live in the house at that time with them? Were you living in the same house?
No, I was living in my own home
Okay.
at the time.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I really didn't know probably how bad things were in the household.
Right.
I didn't know the details at the time.
Did your brother share with you at any point like that was like it was just like I had just had it with them, I was pissed off, nothing? Just like
No, he did come to my house maybe 2 days before that,
Okay.
and I noticed that he was very delusional.
Okay.
He had even seen my PG&E bill laying on the table, and he looked at it and started questioning me, asking me why was I writing his ex. And I thought, what are you talking about?
Right.
And he swore that it was a letter to his ex-girlfriend, and I was corresponding with her, which obviously was not the case. It was a bill. So I knew he was pretty out there that day.
Was he like in and out of coherency? Would you say like obviously like you know you could be like, oh, I had orange juice today, but is that a letter to my ex? Like, do you know what I mean? Like in and out kind of that.
That's actually, yeah, that's a perfect way to explain it. At one moment we could be having a realistic conversation, and then it could fall off and be something absolutely in left field.
Okay.
And I really didn't know how to handle it, because I mean he was very aggressive. So I also didn't want to piss him off, you know.
Right.
I didn't quite know where his mindset was.
You walk the tightrope. You walk the tightrope of like I'm not gonna rock it. I'm just gonna yeah.
Right.
You know, and another thing I feel like people don't realize is that how even for things that we have no control over, that we can feel guilty. Just like, could I have done something, right? The famous thing. Do you mean like, if only I just would have asked him to spend the night. If only I would have blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's a big thing for people too, you know?
Yeah, and you know what's crazy? When you say that, now that kind of reminded me. That night that this happened, well, the Saturday night, my son was supposed to stay the night here with my mom and stepfather. And something was just eating at me that night. And telling me, go pick up your son, go pick him up, bring him home. I had such an uneasy feeling. I couldn't shake it.
Right.
And I came and picked up my son. I mean, and he was so upset with me. He loved spending time here, you know, with his grandparents.
Yeah.
So it was like kicking and screaming to pick him up.
Yeah. Yeah.
But looking back,
that's
I was
like your was kicked in. Yeah. Yeah, it is. I don't think people, you know, again, we should, you know, it's interesting how we always talk about how you should listen to your inner voice, because it can really be, it's there for a reason. I mean,
right. And that's
that sixth sense.
Yeah, looking back over all of the events, that's something that reoccurred for me over and over again.
Yeah.
In different.
Oh yeah, I can only imagine. Did you? So, how? Your brother did about 7 years for that, right? About 7 years for that.
Yeah, I
and
believe,
obviously your stepdad survived it.
Yes.
Not
Thank God, he
easily.
survived it. Yes.
Partially blind, and right. And so, do you know how many times he shot him? Twice. Okay, once in the stomach, once in the, okay.
Yeah.
Again, so I think, so he ended up doing 7 years. And did you see your brother when he was in? Did you see him at all during that time?
Faithfully.
Did you really?
Okay,
That's
oh
the
yeah.
thing to talk about. So, okay. So was he close by-ish for you?
Well, he was obviously in the beginning, he was in the county jail until his trial. So that was like a year and a half, 2 years in county.
Okay.
Before he was sent out, and then I believe from there, he went to processing at North Kern, and then they sent him to Pleasant Valley.
Okay. And they diagnosed your brother with paranoid schizophrenia, did they not? At that juncture, did they?
Not at that juncture.
So most of it was obviously, again, this is total, deduction on our part. Like, and so, as most of us out there know, people who use or used at one time, is that it can put people into a drug psychosis.
Yes.
Which can eventually lead to full-blown psychosis.
Exactly. Yes.
So you're seeing your brother, and how is that, and what was that like? What was that like for you, like seeing him?
Well, in the beginning, when he was in county, to be honest, he stayed in a delusional state for probably 4 months straight. Wow. He was convinced that this was a setup.
Okay.
We would all see pretty soon. We were going to see that this was some kind of setup they tried to put on him, that my stepfather wasn't even really shot. And there was no convincing him that was not the truth.
What happened? Yeah. Yeah.
So it was a shock to me that he was that convinced. No, you're going to see. Just wait. You will see. And as a matter of fact, I remember the day that I was told the reality of what happened set in with him is when his attorney was there visiting. And they asked him some questions, and they actually located another firearm up in the trails that we didn't even know there was another loaded rifle. And he actually was behind the police line. They didn't even know it the whole time.
Oh my gosh.
And way more tragic than it even was.
Did your brother have a paranoia about law enforcement to begin with? I mean, do you think through this kind of,
there was always,
obviously, was it heightened,
Yes, it was always some kind of weird, like, I don't know, resentment. Or, yeah. And it was always there. I never quite understood it, but yeah, I would say that he definitely felt some kind of way.
What was your guys' visits like? Were they like obviously, like we were talking about walking the tightrope, right?
Yeah.
I can only imagine, like, you're not going to be sitting there asking, so why did you do that? Well, why were you thinking that? And again, people will be like, well, why didn't you ask him? No. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's, again, it's not like this person's some stranger. This is my brother. And I don't like what he did, but he is.
No, I don't like what he did. I never will. But also, it's not my job to ask those things for law enforcement.
You're not an investigative reporter, and you're not a judge. We got one judge, and that's it. So yeah.
Right. That's how I feel. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. The visits, once he was sent out to the prison they put him in, our visits actually, believe it or not, it was like almost like old times. We still had our connection at that point.
Yeah.
We have this weird, like, everyone sees it, but they're like, how do you guys do that? Like, we have a way of communicating with each other with a look, with certain body language that nobody else gets. I mean, we could be almost having a conversation in front of people and they wouldn't know what we were, almost like, you know how they talk about twins having that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of.
You guys are always half an age, honestly. You know what I mean? So yeah. Wow.
So we would, and really we would visit like every weekend. We'd get up, leave the house at 4 in the morning,
I remember
go,
those days.
you'd see all the like the faithfuls, you know, that are there every weekend, parked, lined up in the dark.
Yeah. Everybody bringing snacks.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
waiting for the gates to open,
That's
you know.
Did your mom go? Did she go with you sometimes, or did she? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was normally my mom, myself, and my dad that would
Okay.
all go up together.
Did your brother have any? Was he ever married? Did he have any kids? Like,
Had a high school girlfriend
okay.
that he had a child with, but
Okay.
at the time, let's see, when his daughter was 3 years old, she was taken out of his life and our lives.
Okay.
And
Okay. Curious.
although it
miles down the road that you guys will understand, but I
right, yeah.
So, okay, so what shocked me when you and I talked was like I was like 7 years. Like to me that like blows my mind, right? Because I'm just
Right.
Mitch did 38 years for something that he was standing there, but he didn't do the action. This is somebody who quite clearly did the action, and they're like, okay.
Yeah.
And then I was like, when Jen
No
said
doubt.
7 years, I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah, say that again. Right. I know, it blows my mind too, and it's
Head around it, honestly. So how at this time, how is your stepdad? Like, obviously he's healing. Obviously he's living his life while your brother's in prison. How is his reaction to like your brother's sentence? Was he good with the sentence? Do you think it was too much? What was your family on your side kind of feeling about that?
well, my stepfather actually wrote a letter on his behalf, with some persuading,
Okay.
asking for him to get felony probation and go to drug rehab, for that to be a sentence.
And what did the judge say when the judge?
Well, he said, well, although this letter came from the victim, I cannot in good conscience agree with this. I can't. And I would set a precedence for anyone else that commits the same crime or something similar, and I would have to give them the same sentence.
Right.
So he said, I have to give him prison time.
Did he get like 15 and then did 7 like?
Yeah, I think it was 10.
Okay.
I think it was 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah. Actual sentence.
So how is it now? I actually didn't ask you this when we talked the other night. I'm really kind of curious. How was it after the fact? How was it with like your stepdad's side of the family? How was that for you after the fact? And how was that for your mom too? Like, what did that,
that's something that they started treating her poorly,
Right.
immediately.
Right.
And it really broke my heart for her, and still does, because nobody, like you said,
still together? Are they still together now?
they are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's
they're
something to make it through. Not very many people make it through.
That is something that,
yeah.
many years later, people still ask me, that's so crazy. Why would they stay together?
Wow.
Yeah.
So your brother, so obviously you guys are getting treated like black sheep. That's not, by the way, that's not a racist comment, everybody.
Right?
Okay.
I know, right?
So we're getting treated like, redheaded stepchildren, all those things that go with those, and you're being shunned, and people aren't communicating with you. And how is it for you, like living in that town after that happened? What was that like for you?
There was probably the first 4 years, I I think I could probably count on both hands how many times I actually left my home.
Really?
I became a complete, like, shut-in, really.
Wow.
I couldn't face the world. I became physically ill, severely depressed. Everything just started falling apart. And the fact that my brother was gone, I don't know if anyone else can relate to this, but I, in some way, tried to punish myself the same he was being punished. So I felt like, oh, like, say there was like his favorite dish being made for
Right.
dinner.
Right.
I wouldn't let myself eat because
right. So you're
I
like,
will not have.
yeah, I can't do like almost like when someone passes, right? People don't understand that it's kind of the same. It's kind of the same. Like you grieve, and I know people will be like, well, at least they're whatever's alive. That's all true. But when you lose someone that you're so close to like that, you almost feel like the whole thing. Like, well, someone asked you, hey, let's go to Disneyland, right? And you're like, I can't, right? Because you feel like, well, I can't be out there having a good time when my brother's sitting in prison and my family's suffering through this shit right now. Like, how am I supposed to have a good time? Yeah.
Yeah, I stopped, and I feel a lot of guilt over that, obviously, because of my kids. Like, it's not fair to them that I slipped into this, deep, dark depression, but I felt like I couldn't celebrate anything in life. I couldn't. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I felt guilty. If I even felt happiness, I felt guilty.
Right. Right. Well, you were kind of missing your other half too. And then, again, living in the small town, living with, this over you. People, you go in the grocery store, people are going to whisper, people are going to talk behind your back. You're very aware of it. And then, the fact that you have children, right? Yeah. And so that in turn, that's when you're being protective, Jimmy, in a way, because again, your children had nothing to do with it, but you're at, Joe Schmo grocery store there with your daughter, your son, and people are like whispering and, at school, you feel like they're going to figure that it's hard. Again, you don't understand that when things happen like that goes, it trickles way down.
And that's a lot of times what happened when I did go in public. So I think that's why I pulled away even more, because there were times I was in the grocery store, several times, when I would catch people pointing and whispering.
Right.
There was one time I actually heard the girl say, hey, that's the sister of that crazy guy that tried to kill his stepdad.
Right.
And I just remember,
you get people's curiosity, but you don't get their meanness. That's my thing is, right? If you're curious, I totally understand that. Like, it's whatever. It's, this doesn't happen every day in a small town. I get it. But at the same time, trying to lump you in and trying to make you feel bad, that's shitty. And I just think that people should be mindful of that, is that, it really affects people's mental health and wellness, and for families, not just an individual.
It affects the entire family unit.
Right. 100%. 100%. And so your brother, does he, so obviously he gets out of prison after what, seven years? And kind of what's the plan? Like, what's your family plan between the person that he tried to hurt, your mom, and your mom, I should say, he didn't try and hurt your mom, yourself, and kind of, do you guys have kind of are you guys talking together about like what that's going to look like when he comes home? Do you guys have a plan, or you guys just kind of winging it? What does that look like?
Yeah, so the plan was pretty much like my mom, my real dad, or our real dad, and myself,
Okay.
We would go pick him up when he was released. He would come home to dad's. He would parole there at dad's.
Okay.
And he would live there. At the time, my dad had bought a home that he wanted, obviously a family home for his kids and grandkids to come to.
Yeah.
And it needed a lot of work. He was remodeling it. So he was excited to think that him and his son can bond over, fixing the place up. He was excited to have something for him to come home to.
So did you go pick him up? Did you and your dad go? Like, what did that look like?
My mom, my dad, and I, the three of us, went and picked him up. And it was like I think it was a Greyhound station that most of the guys were getting on a bus to go wherever they were hurling to.
Okay.
And we were probably the only family that showed up to actually pick up our loved one. I was so shocked. Yeah, everybody else was being given a ticket and being put on a bus. So,
yeah. What's your brother's like? So when you're visiting him during this time, before obviously he got out and then he gets out, is his mental state kind of the same? Is it worse? Is it kind of mellowing out? Like what is that? What was that like?
When we picked him up, I thought he seemed like his old self.
Okay.
He was excited to go eat, obviously. Like,
right.
We were talking about, what do you want to eat? What do you want for your first night's dinner? And he already had picked out my green chicken enchiladas, and it was on.
Yeah.
We picked him up, and I think we went to a Denny's, and I just got the biggest kick out of sitting there watching him enjoy his meal. And I so appreciated that moment.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Sitting together.
That's one of the things I know that, I've definitely done since Mitch has been home is that like I try to take these kind of snapshots, like right, like whether it's like we were just with our grandkids and like and mental snapshots, not like actual like cell phone, but right. Just a moment, right? We'll catch you and I always tell Mitch it's hard for him to. I was like just stay in the present. Do you mean like he's a big planner? Do you mean like I'm going to do this? I want to do all these things, which is awesome, and that's what kind of right. That's what kept him going in prison. But I think, it's important to be present, and for people to come to understand why. But we have to take those really personal snapshots because we don't know. We're not guaranteed tomorrow. We don't know what that's going to look like. And I'm really grateful for those with my own family. Do you mean like because they're here, and that's where they're gonna stay, right? So
and nobody can take that.
Nobody can take it. And so was your brother getting did you say he got any help while he was in prison? And what I mean by that is like, did they were like, can you want to see professionals, or do you want to see a mental health professional, or do you feel like he got that support while he was in?
I didn't know at the time if he did. I know that we had some conversations where he would mention that it wasn't looked
I hear you. Yeah.
Very kindly to be on medication.
Right. Mitch just talked about that, right? And it seems that people look at that like you're, you go see someone other than if like you're trying to get out and you're going to like program that you have to go to, like if you do that outside that people, at that. I think that's changing. I hope that's changing. I'm pretty sure it is from what Mitch said, but I think there's such a stigma that there used to be for sure.
Yeah.
That 100%.
So at that, yeah, there definitely was at that time.
So you feel like when he got home, like it's like he's, pretty like this is this is my brother. This is kind of my old brother back, and things are going in a positive motion, right?
Right. Everything was sort of falling into place.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you guys hang out a lot? Like when he got home, did you guys talk a lot? Like, In
the beginning, we did. Yeah. In the beginning, it was trying to make up for lost time.
Yeah.
And he still had some of his routine that he stuck to, that he had developed when he was in there.
Okay.
And it was different for me to see him be so organized and such a clean freak. And so I was like, wow, I'm impressed. I wish I could get some of that from you.
I know Mitch would always say to me, he'd be like, why do you gotta leave your stuff like over there or whatever? And he's like, I go, really? Like, and he go, I lived in this little tiny thing, but my shit was always hella organized. He was like, like I had my spice rack, I had, and it was. And I was like, well, you kind of have to be when you have this little tiny space to operate in. Do you mean? And I don't, because I got all this room, so I'm gonna throw my shit there.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it does, you know what, though, for some people it does set up like that that organization can either be a positive thing or it can go to the negative, like if it's like overly OCD.
Exactly.
So yeah.
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 That's definitely true.
Did you so everything's cool, obviously. How is your dad? And okay, so let me ask this because I actually didn't ask you this the other night because I just thought about this last night. So when he gets out, does he see your stepdad? Does he go? Is he allowed to be within so many or no?
Now, there's a no contact order that the judge
Okay.
put in place.
I was curious. Okay.
So he
All
was
right.
not allowed to come to the residence or approach him in public either.
Okay. So how's things going? Like, let's say a couple months in with your dad. How's that going with them living together?
A couple months in, everything was going well. They were working on the house. They were doing repairs together. It was like what I was waiting for. I felt like, okay, well, we're going to be a family again. Like it's possible. We're working towards it.
Right. And was your mom spending time with him or?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay.
She was, but I know that had to be really difficult because I'm sure she was getting pressure, or maybe some hard feelings at home when she would go see my brother and then come back. Like, I get it,
Yeah, I get it. Like, this guy tried to take my life and you're going over the same, but it happens.
Yeah.
Right. It's not.
Right.
Yeah, I get that.
Right. So I'm sure that was difficult. I mean, just like you can imagine when it would come to like putting money on his books, like that was a point of,
for sure.
Right.
When did you start? So obviously you are living your life. You're happy your brother's out. You're being, you know what I mean? This is awesome. And they seem to be doing well. But obviously we know that takes a turn. Did your brother start using again? Did you notice like a change in when he started? Like, and I think there was something that happened at work too that kind of altered things. So what was that what was happening?
The first thing I noticed that kind of grabbed my attention was he started going out.
Okay.
And kind of around some of the old people from back in the day.
Yeah.
And I knew that wasn't a good thing, but I thought, well, I mean, he has to test every time he sees his officer. So, I mean, if he was on drugs, they would know. So he can't be on drugs. He's just going out to socialize. But deep down inside, I knew that's just too close.
It's too close, and you got to figure too that people are probably, for him to put himself out there in the first place, I can only imagine how that would be. Like, what are people going to say to me? What are people going to whatever? So let me just have 5 shots before I go out, or let me just do a shot or whatever before I go, because then I'm gonna deal with it the way I'm gonna deal with it.
And one of the things, I mean, I'm sure a lot of guys feel like they're the tough guy in their hometown.
Yeah.
But a lot of people anyone that knew him to be the tough guy.
Right.
So a lot of people use that to their advantage. Like, hey, come over here. That's the guy that I told you was, hitting up my old lady. Or that's the guy that was talking shit about you and you were locked up.
Right.
There started to be physical altercations.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
And violence was always something that he was drawn to.
Right. Right.
He was good at. Yeah.
100%. So so your brother is like, he's going out again, you know, people are like, you know, using him like a novelty, you know.
Welcome home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm associated with this badass, so yeah, look, like he's a little crazy and whatever,
Yeah.
and yeah. The same
Yeah,
people, I'm sure, the same people I'm sure that were talking shit when this happened.
Yeah, all the ones that were scared of him when he was
Yeah.
away, and
Yeah.
you know, had a lot to say to each other. Yeah. But they were taking advantage of it once he was home. Yeah.
Right. So do you suspect, like, oh, it's got Mitch's name under my name. That's awesome. I just noticed it came up with it said Mitch Smiley. I'm like, no, that's not him. But so does this progress into more? Like, was
Yeah.
it, you know,
And it did. And I started to see old signs that I had recognized from before. And I kind of started taking a step back.
Right.
Because I mean, to be honest, I was a little fearful myself. I mean, I was kind of scared of what could happen at that point. I didn't know how far things were progressing with what he was getting into or what he was doing when he was going out. But I saw a change in him.
What did your dad say? Did your dad say that he was noticing a change in that? Did he tell you that, or?
You know, it's kind of sad to think of it like this, say this, but I think my dad was so like laser focused on keeping him out of prison.
Right.
That he really tried to keep it together and not make a big deal out of things. There's things I didn't even know about that were happening at the home.
Okay. So is him, you know, this might have been after the fact, obviously, that you found out about this, but so what was going on that you found out later, like between your dad and your brother? Like, what kind of stuff was happening that you found out later?
Yeah, I found out later that there was actual physical altercations between my brother and my dad going on.
And how old was your dad at that, like, what was like your dad's age at that time?
Was like late 60s.
Okay.
At that point. Mm-hmm.
And your brother's now in his
40. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So but again, that's hindsight, right? You didn't hear this until
right. Yeah.
So again, you know, I think this is something important to kind of touch on, is that you know, when people start seeing, again, generationally, that comes from, we don't talk about it. We're only going to keep this in this small little circle. But what that can do sometimes, as you're going to see, is that the impacts of those decisions not to share that and not to can have devastating repercussions. Yeah. And that's why, you know, some people say, oh, people share everything now. Like, you know, people wear their hearts on their sleeves. You know, again, that generation is really like opposed to any kind of mental health support.
Right.
You know, as a parent, I'm sure that your dad was feeling like, you know, what is my part in being responsible for what happened in the first place? So I'm going to try to fix it. You know, and I'm sure even for you, you know, I'm going to be there to support my dad. I'm going to be there to support my brother. But you can't do something with what you don't know.
Right. And that's exactly, I think exactly what was going on. I mean, my dad was just trying to keep everything cool. You know, he wanted to make sure that everything was okay. He didn't want to worry me. He didn't want to worry anyone else.
Right.
And he felt like he could deal with it. He could handle it.
Did your dad ever remarry?
No, he never remarried.
Yeah.
I never even saw him with a girlfriend or
yeah.
He went on a date and he called me and told me about it after the fact and how awkward it was.
Oh.
So,
yeah. That's you know, that's tough, because you're kind of, again, I'm sure he felt really, you know, like it almost comes to what we talked about earlier, right? About that we think that we have the ability to fix things like that. And that is
Right.
way out of any of our wheelhouses. I'm not a therapist, you know, like most people are not. And so
Right.
if you're not dealing and people aren't sharing information about what is happening, and I, within their own family, I don't mean like going to talk to like everybody and their mother, but if your circle, if you are not communicating that, you can't help.
Right. Yeah. And it makes, I had, I'm sure this is like a quote somewhere. I had heard this and it made a lot of sense when they say, you know, secrets keep you sick. Like if you keep
True.
things a
That's true.
secret within your family or other things in life, you can't really heal from it. You
Right.
can't.
And you can't move forward. You
Right.
can't, you're going to stay stuck in that same place, you know?
Exactly.
Did you, so I'm curious for you, like through this time, are you still going to, did you go back to the church? Are you feeling like you have support in your own life, through your church or through your friends or family? How are you feeling like during this kind of, at this time?
You know, I really withdrew from church, from my personal life, from so many things because I feared people's judgment.
Right,
People even have an opinion on me having a relationship with my brother. Like
right.
I, so I really just kept to myself.
Okay.
Me, you know, I
Yeah.
was with my kids and family, and I just stayed to myself.
Okay.
And I don't feel like I had, no, I don't feel like I had much of a support system.
Okay. So yeah, that's another thing is that, you know, again, uh, others that are related to people or relationships with these people or anything like that. You know, I was kind of talking to Jen about, I think it's important, and I think this was a good platform, so to speak, about that. I've seen, like, I've looked purposefully to see if there were other channels or groups that had kind of, you know, a support for people who have been family members or significant others or whatever. And there are some, but I don't, you know, I haven't seen any. I purposely went out and looked, and I myself didn't find a lot. So one
Yeah.
of the things that Jennifer probably, Jennifer didn't know I was going to say this, but one of the things I wanted to do, and I think is really important, is that I just kind of mentioned it to Jim and Jen in kind of a drive-by, is that, you know, Jen and I talked quite a bit before we got to this juncture of doing this interview. And one of the things I mentioned to her was I felt like it was important that there was a platform for this. So I'm going to try to convince Jen when we get done doing this that I think that she's definitely a good person to speak on that and to help others. Jen has a very innate way about her and about wanting to help others and to feel like she's reciprocating her loss into something good for herself and something good for others. And you'll know more as we do this. I mean, I honestly, I've walked a pretty interesting life, but I've been through a lot, but the fact that Jen is still standing right now just shocks me. And it's a commendable thing in her human spirit for her to have walked through this and still standing. And I want her to be able to do something with this, other than people asking about her brother and asking about whatever, which we know is going to come with this. I mean, Jen and I both know that that's going to come, and she's open to that to a point, and she doesn't want to answer, she's not going to answer. But I think that it's important for people to have that, because it can really put someone in a dark, not very nice place.
Oh, yeah.
When someone that is not you commits a crime against another person can end up. And I think it's important that those others also have support. I mean, these guys have, honestly, we have this prison channel, right? And this prison channel is, you know, and believe me, people have gotten on and talked shit about her brother and said stuff, and to be able, and to have to sit back and not say, yes, those things you said were true, but you don't get the right to do that. You don't get to, like, you don't get to, you weren't on any side of this crime, you know, crimes. And I think it's important for, you know, she's straddling the fence. She's still going to straddle the fence. Jenna's going to straddle the fence for the rest of her life. Do you know what I mean? And so I think the thing is, she doesn't have to pick a side, and you should be able to be on both sides, that you are going to support your brother and you are going to support yourself. So so I'm just, this is kind of a, I don't want to call it a trigger warning or whatever, but some of this conversation is going to be kind of shocking. And so I just want to kind of prepare people for that. I was myself, and not much shocks me. So I just want, you know, Jen, I don't want you to be nervous about it, but I want you to really, you know, tell your truth and what you know to be true. Again, this is just a reminder that this is his sister, but she lived through this with him, and this is kind of her version of what that was like for her to go through this. So no way are we, is she saying, you know, these are her feelings and what she responded to, what she went through with this. So I just kind of want to give everybody kind of a point. So okay, go ahead.
So
It's okay. Okay. About that. So is your brother working at this point, or like is he working?
No, that was something that actually did come. He did end up getting a job with a local company. There was a contractor out here that hired him, and he seemed to hire a lot of guys who had just, you know, been released from jail or prison. And looking back, I think he kind of took advantage of their situation in the way that he paid them less than minimum wage, paid them off the books, no workers' comp insurance, and, you know, basically, like, just didn't have all the right equipment or things the guys needed, and just worked them hard.
Very common, really common. Yep. Yeah.
And I'm thinking, you know, anybody else that hadn't done time or been through their similar situations wouldn't have put up with it or worked there. But you know, were desperate for a job and to start making money again. So he was doing like construction type work for a while. And unfortunately, there was an accident on the job site, and nobody was there at the time. There were no safety harnesses, and somebody showed up hours later to whatever job site my brother was on and found him on the ground. And apparently he had fallen like 2 stories and hit his head. Wow. So he was taken in for medical treatment. There were, I'm sure, scans and everything like that done. You know,
when you said earlier when we had talked, you said like there was did somebody on the job site find him like laying there?
I think, yeah. They had drove up to check on how the job was progressing, and he was laying on the ground. Yeah. So at that point, after he was stable, and really I think they just kind of pushed him in and out of the hospital, we noticed a difference in how the medical staff and everybody treated him right away, because it was obvious to them he had been in prison. They even made the comment like, "Oh, you've been to prison. I noticed your tattoos." So the medical care he got was very less than I think what he should have gotten. what anybody else would have thought. And I think there were some things that went unnoticed because they didn't seek out all the tests that maybe should have been done. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
You know?
And again, you're in the same town, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
So after that, I did start to notice a change in his behavior even. He started withdrawing from being social like he had been and started staying home and just sticking to himself.
Yeah.
There was an incident on Easter that where he had tried to he tried to attack my husband while my husband was holding our new baby.